Here is the direct translation of the script into English, tailored for a football channel audience, with citations confirming the relevant transfer news and context. Inter Miami has just presented an offer of €20 million for Giovanni Lo Celso, and here is the problem. According to MLS salary cap rules, that move is completely impossible. Messi appears in the financial documents with figures that defy all the logic of the system, and while you see the thumbnail with the banknotes and the words "legal cheat," the rest of the league is exploding on forums and social media denouncing privileges. How can a team spend what technically does not exist in its budget? Wait, because this goes far beyond a simple signing. In this video, you're going to discover 3 things. First, why the offer for Lo Celso mathematically breaks the rules that all other teams must respect. Second, what furious fans are saying on Reddit and how they compare Miami's spending to historic franchises that cannot make moves. And third, the moral dilemma that no one wants to admit, if it is worth destroying sporting equality to have the best player in history. Stay until the end of the video, and you will understand the why of everything. It is December 2025, and while most MLS teams are in hibernation mode after the MLS Cup, the Inter Miami front office is operating like a war room. The roster confirmation for 2026 came out weeks ago. Lionel Messi appears on the list of guaranteed contracts, along with Tomas Aviles and Benjamin Cremaschi, securing the backbone of the project. But what is happening behind the scenes is an operation that has the rest of the league watching with crossed arms and clenched jaws. Because while other teams calculate every dollar as if it were their last, Miami is moving chips that, according to the manual, shouldn't exist. The scene is this: Real Betis receives a call. An informal, discreet offer, ranging between 15 and 20 million euros for Lo Celso. The Argentine midfielder, Messi's teammate in the Scaloneta, is open to the move. He wants to reunite with Leo in Miami, play under the Florida sun, and prepare for the 2026 World Cup in the same locker room as the captain. Everything sounds logical, emotional, even epic. Except for a technical detail that sets off all the alarms. The MLS salary cap establishes a strict limit on salary spending per team, and that limit is not negotiable. Or at least, it wasn't until Messi arrived. Here comes the first fact that no one tells you. The salary cap in 2025 hovers around $5 million per team, with limited exceptions called designated players, which allow 3 signings outside that ceiling. Miami already has its 3 spots occupied: Messi, Luis Suarez, and Sergio Busquets. So how does Lo Celso fit in? How do Facundo Mora and Lautaro Di Lalo fit into that equation when Racing and Boca are also bidding for them? The official answer is exception mechanisms, contract restructuring, targeted allocation money. The real answer is no one knows exactly how they are doing it, and that is driving the competition crazy. Imagine you are the sporting director of the Los Angeles Galaxy. You have spent 3 months negotiating the loan of a fullback because you have no margin in the salary cap. You calculate every bonus, every assist incentive, every performance clause. And then you see that Miami presents $20 million for an elite European midfielder, adds Mora and Di Lalo to that, and still keeps Messi, Suarez, and Busquets on the roster. Your first reaction is not admiration. It is indignation. Your second reaction is to open Reddit. The threads on MLS forums are ruthless. Inter Amigos has fiscal immunity, says one. Beckham called Garber and handed him a blank check, says another, referring to David Beckham, the club's co-owner, and Don Garber, the league commissioner. The accusations are not subtle: preferential treatment, excessive flexibility, double standards. A Seattle user compared his team's budget with Miami's, and the difference is so brutal it looks like an Excel error. But it isn't. It is the new reality of a league that is changing its rules in real time to accommodate a player who, technically, shouldn't fit into its system. And do you know what is most disturbing about all this? That Miami is not doing anything illegal. At least not on paper. They are using loopholes, creative interpretations, and direct negotiations with the league office that other teams simply do not have access to, or do not have the political power to demand. It's like playing Monopoly when one of the players has a secret agreement with the banker. Technically, it's within the game, but everyone knows something isn't right. Now, before you think this is just envy from small teams, let me take you to the press room of a historic MLS team. I won't name which one, but its head coach gave a conference a few weeks ago where, between the lines, he dropped a bombshell. He was asked why they hadn't signed a South American striker who was available. His answer was, We play by the rules we signed in 2015. Other teams seem to have a different rulebook. The room went silent. No one dared to ask who he was referring to, but everyone knew. Because here is the crux of the matter. Tata Martino, before leaving, publicly asked for more flexibility in the salary cap. He said that if MLS wanted to compete with Europe, it needed to stop tying its hands with regional league salary limits. And curiously, months later, Miami is operating as if those limits didn't exist. Coincidence? Maybe. Convenient? Absolutely. Now think about this. Facundo Moura has offers from River Plate, one of the biggest clubs in South America, and he is choosing MLS. Lautaro Di Lalo can stay at Boca Juniors, the cathedral of Argentine football, and prefers Miami. 5 years ago, that was unthinkable. MLS was the retirement destination, not the competitive option. But something has changed, and that something has a proper name: the Scaloneta narrative. Miami is not signing players, it is building a national team on US soil. And for that narrative to work, they need to break some rules. Or at least, bend them until they look unrecognizable. But what no one saw was what happened in the closed-door meetings between Miami's owners and the MLS central office in New York. Now comes the part where everyone has an opinion, but few have the real data. The easy version, the one circulating on Twitter and afternoon sports shows, goes something like this: Messi arrived in Miami, the team became successful, and now they have money to sign whoever they want. End of story. Applause. Everyone happy. Except that version is so superficial it doesn't withstand even 5 minutes of serious analysis. The reality is quite a bit more uncomfortable, and to understand it you need to know how the MLS salary cap actually works. This is not a system like La Liga or the Premier League, where clubs spend according to their revenue. Here, the league is a single entity. All teams are franchises of the same company. The salary cap exists to guarantee competitive parity, so that a team from Kansas City can compete with one from Los Angeles regardless of market size. It is sporting socialism at its finest. And for years it worked. Teams won through smart management, not by the checkbook. Then Messi arrives in July 2023, and the whole model wobbles. Because Messi is not just a player, he is an industry. He generates revenue through merchandising, MLS season pass, tourism, and brand valuation. Apple TV paid an astronomical figure for MLS TV rights precisely anticipating this type of signing. And here is where the conversation gets complicated, because if Messi generates more money than he costs, doesn't it make sense to relax the rules for him? The MLS office clearly thinks so. But that logic opens a Pandora's box. If Miami can spend $20 million on Lo Celso because Messi generates revenue, why can't Atlanta United do the same, arguing that their stadium sells 70,000 tickets per match? Why does Seattle, with a massive fan base, have to respect the salary cap while Miami ignores it? The official answer is that Miami is using legal mechanisms within the regulations. The unofficial answer is that they are receiving favorable interpretations that other teams do not get. And here enters the passage that defines the whole conflict. Imagine two parallel universes. In the first, the myth, MLS is a fair league where everyone competes on equal terms, and Miami's success is the result of brilliant management and long-term vision. In the second, the reality, MLS is doing everything possible to make Miami work because it knows that Messi is its only window to compete with European football in terms of global relevance. And if that means twisting some rules, applying creative exceptions, and looking the other way when the numbers don't add up, then so be it. The problem is that both universes coexist in the same reality, and depending on who you are, a Miami fan or a fan of the rest of the league, you live in one or the other. Inter Miami supporters see an ambitious project that is raising the level of the entire competition. The others see a team with unjustified privileges that distorts competitive parity. Who is right? Probably both. If you're following me so far, hit like on the video because this gets even denser. Because now we need to talk about concrete figures, and here is where everything gets murky. Messi has a contract that, according to reports, includes equity stakes, franchise growth bonuses, and image deals that technically do not count against the salary cap. That is, his official salary for cap purposes could be $5 million, while his real remuneration hovers around stratospheric figures. It is completely legal, but it is also completely opaque. Now multiply that opacity by every signing of the Messi era. Suarez arrived with a similar agreement. Busquets too. And Lo Celso. If the signing goes through, you can bet his salary structure will have so many layers it will look like a wedding cake. Part of the payment could come from external sponsors linked to the league, another part from image rights ceded to the club, another from performance incentives that don't impact the cap until they are triggered. At the end of the day, the player collects his money, but the accounting books show a fraction of that figure. Is it cheating? Technically no. Is it ethical? That's where the conversation gets complicated. Because while Miami is following the letter of the law, it is violating its spirit. The salary cap was designed to avoid exactly what is happening: a team with more political and commercial resources dominating the league by buying talent. And yet, here we are. Now think about the experience of the average MLS fan. You've spent years following your team, celebrating when they sign a decent player from the Argentine second division, getting excited because they brought a veteran from Europe who still has some gas in the tank. And suddenly you see Miami bringing in Mura, whom River Plate wanted desperately, and Di Lalo, whom Boca considered non-transferable. It isn't envy. It is systemic frustration. Because you realize that no matter how well your team manages, it will never be able to compete with a franchise that has access to financial tools the others cannot touch. And here appears a clue that changes the whole focus of the conversation. A few weeks ago, a journalist specialized in sports finance published an analysis in his blog, which by the way almost no one read, where he demonstrated something fascinating. If you apply the standard salary cap rules to Miami's current squad, the team would be exceeded by almost 40%. 40%. That is not a rounding error or a minor exception. It is a structural gap that can only be explained in two ways. Either Miami has a team of accountants so brilliant they should be working for NASA, or the league is turning a blind eye systematically. The truth is probably in the middle. Miami has legal resources and financial creativity that other teams do not possess. But it also has the political backing of a league that knows that without Messi, the experiment of MLS as a global league deflates. Apple TV will not renew those million-dollar contracts if international audiences disappear. Sponsors will not maintain their investments if the league returns to being a regional competition without recognizable stars. Messi is not just a player for MLS. He is the product. And when the product is at stake, the rules become negotiable. Now imagine the meeting room where these decisions are made. Don Garber, the commissioner, sitting at the head of the table. The owners of the 29 franchises present via video conference. And at some point someone says, "If we let Miami do this, we are creating a precedent." And another responds, "If we don't let Miami do this, Messi leaves in 2 years and we go back to being irrelevant." What would you do in that situation? Would you protect the integrity of the system or bet everything on the only ace you have? The league chose to bet. And now it is paying the price in internal credibility, while collecting dividends in global visibility. It is a transaction. Cold, calculated, and deeply controversial. Because while Miami negotiates with Lo Celso and closes signings that defy the logic of the system, there are teams like Cincinnati or Dallas that are selling players to not exceed the cap. There are sporting directors rejecting transfers because they cannot afford $2,000 more in weekly wages. And there are coaches who have to explain to their fans why they didn't sign that striker they needed, while watching Miami move $20 million as if it were loose change. Here is where the story gets serious. Because we are not just talking about football. We are talking about the moral architecture of an entire league. And that architecture is creaking. In Reddit forums, where anonymity allows frustration to be more honest, the posts are brutal. "MLS died the day they let Miami operate like a European team," says one. "I'm not paying for the MLS season pass again while this keeps happening," says another. There are entire threads dedicated to calculating how much Miami really spends, comparing transfer figures, estimated salaries, and advertising deals. The numbers never add up. And every time they don't add up, the theory that Miami has preferential treatment is reinforced. But there is a silent factor that explains the impossible, and it is the one most analysts don't want to touch because it is politically uncomfortable. Miami is not just breaking the salary cap, it is redefining what team means in MLS. For 20 years, the league operated under a simple principle. We are all equal, we all compete under the same conditions, and the champion is defined by sporting management, not economic power. It was the MLS model. Predictable, controlled, socialist in its design. It worked to build stability, but it killed ambition. And then Messi arrived, and with him the question no one wanted to ask. What happens if we let one team be unequal? The answer is happening in real time. Miami now operates as a hybrid, an MLS franchise on paper, a European club in practice. And the fascinating part, and terrifying, depending on your perspective, is that the league is allowing it because it knows the alternative is worse. Without a dominant Miami, without Messi shining, without that Scaloneta in Florida narrative, MLS goes back to being what it always was: a development league for South American talents in transit and a golden retirement for European stars in decline. Let's go to the numbers, but not the ones that appear in official statements. Let's talk about the real numbers. According to independent financial analysts' estimates, Miami's squad in 2026, if all rumored signings go through, would have a market value close to $150 million. Now compare that with the official MLS salary ceiling, which hovers around the $5 million base plus designated player exceptions. Even being generous with interpretations, we are talking about a gap that cannot be explained solely by accounting creativity. So how do they do it? One part comes from what I mentioned before: fragmented salary structures where only a fraction counts against the cap. Another part comes from direct agreements with the league, where certain payments are classified as investment in MLS growth and not as team spending. And a third part, the most opaque, comes from sponsors who technically pay the player, not the club, but coincidentally those sponsors have commercial ties to Miami's owners. It is legal. It is sophisticated. And it is exactly the kind of financial engineering the salary cap was designed to prevent. Now let's talk about Facundo Moura. Right back, 26 years old, a figure at Racing Club. River Plate offered a contract that in Argentina is considered generous. And Moura said no because Miami put something better on the table. How can Miami outperform River, one of the richest clubs in South America, in a salary bidding war, when technically it is tied to the salary cap? The short answer is that it isn't. Not really. Because when you have access to mechanisms that other teams in your own league do not have, the salary limit becomes a suggestion, not a barrier. And here comes the detail no one connected until now. Lo Celso, Moura, Di Lalo. They are all Argentine. They all played with Messi at some point, or at least share close circles in the selection. The official narrative is that they want to come to Miami for the opportunity to play with the best in the world. The real narrative is that they are being offered contracts that double, sometimes triple, what they would earn in Europe or South America, and they are structured in such a way that legally they don't explode the MLS system, but morally they break it completely. Imagine you are Paulo Dybala, currently playing on another MLS team under normal rules. Your salary counts entirely against the cap. You don't have external image deals. You don't have hidden bonuses. And then you see Lo Celso arrive in Miami with a package that, if applied to your team, would leave them in technical bankruptcy. How do you feel? Admiration for Miami's management? Or resentment for a system that clearly has two sets of rules? Coaches don't speak publicly about this because they know that criticizing Miami is criticizing Messi, and criticizing Messi in MLS is professional suicide. But in private, the conversations are different. A coach from a Western Conference team told a journalist, off the record, that preparing a match against Miami is no longer tactical analysis. It is frustration management. Because you know you are going to face a team that has 3 times your budget, players who technically shouldn't all be on the same roster, and a refereeing system that, conscious or not, tends to protect the star product. Now, does this mean Miami is cheating? Here is where the answer becomes philosophical. If the rules say something is allowed, but those rules are modified specifically to allow it, is it legal or is it a constructed legality? It's as if you were playing chess and halfway through the game your opponent moved the rook diagonally, and when you protest, the referee said, for this specific player, rooks can do that. Technically, they didn't break the rules, but they clearly broke the game. And the crazy part is that this is just the beginning. Because if Lo Celso arrives in January, and Moura and Di Lalo join in the summer, Miami will have a squad that in any other league would be a mid-table European side. In MLS, it will be a super team without real competition. And when they win, when they dominate, when they lift trophies, the question will be, did they win because they were better, or did they win because they played by different rules? Messi's numbers in 2025 were obscene: 29 goals in 28 matches, MLS Golden Boot. But those numbers wouldn't exist without Busquets distributing, without Suarez opening spaces, without the reinforced defense that other teams can't afford. The system works because every piece is designed for Messi to shine. And every piece costs money that, according to official rules, shouldn't be available. Now comes the part that will make you rethink everything you've heard so far. Because there is an element in this story that almost no one mentions, and it is the most explosive of all: the silent complicity of the rest of the league. Yes, owners of other franchises complain in private. Yes, coaches resent the inequality. But when it comes time to vote in MLS meetings, when Garber proposes another temporary exception to accommodate a Miami signing, how many vote against it? Almost none. Because everyone knows that if Miami succeeds, if Messi continues to shine, if stadiums fill up and audiences grow, everyone benefits. TV rights go up. Sponsors pay more. The value of every franchise increases. It is a Faustian pact. You sacrifice competitive integrity in exchange for commercial relevance. And so far, the league has decided the deal is worth it. But there is a hidden cost that no one is calculating. Every time a small team loses to Miami by 3 goals, every time a promising signing chooses Florida over another market, every time a fan from Kansas City or Montreal sees that their team cannot compete structurally, the emotional connection to the league erodes a little more. Because sports work when you believe your team has a chance. And in the MLS of 2025, if you aren't Miami, that belief requires an increasingly larger leap of faith. Now imagine the darkest scenario, the one no one in the central office wants to contemplate. Messi retires in 2027. Lo Celso ages. The star signings stop arriving because the window to play with Messi closes. What is left for Miami? An expensive team, an inflated structure, and a league that permanently modified its rules to accommodate an era that has already ended. And what is left for the rest of MLS? A distorted system where Miami's precedents can now be used by other wealthy teams, creating a new aristocracy that turns the league into what it always wanted to avoid: a cheap copy of Europe where money decides everything. That is the true dilemma. It is not whether Miami is cheating. It is whether MLS is destroying its own identity to chase a relevance that might be ephemeral. And when Messi is gone, when the cameras turn off and the tourists stop filling the stadium, the league will have to look in the mirror and ask itself, was it worth it? If you've made it this far, subscribe, because in the second part we are going to reveal something that no mainstream media dares to say. But before we get to that, you need to understand a context that changes the whole equation. And that context has to do with something much bigger than football. It has to do with sports geopolitics, with the 2026 World Cup, and with a bet that goes far beyond winning MLS titles. The 2026 World Cup is the true reason behind all of this. And when you understand that piece, everything else makes sense in an almost disturbing way. Because what is happening in Miami is not just a sporting experiment or an isolated commercial strategy. It is the construction of a physical and emotional platform for Messi to arrive at the most important tournament of his life in the best possible conditions. And the MLS knows it. The entire league is willing to bend its own rules because it knows that if Messi lifts that cup on US soil, wearing the Inter Miami shirt weeks before, the return on that investment will be stratospheric. Think about the timeline. Messi arrives in Miami in July 2023, just after winning the World Cup in Qatar. The 2026 World Cup is played in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. The final will be at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Messi will be 39 years old. It is, almost certainly, his last chance to play in a World Cup. And Miami is building an entire ecosystem so that those 18 months prior to the tournament are perfect. Elite squad, no real competitive pressure, ideal climate, controlled training, managed minutes. It is a base camp disguised as a football team. Now look at the signings in that light. Lo Celso isn't coming just because he wants to play with Messi. He is coming because he is part of the Argentine national team's plan to arrive at the World Cup with club-level chemistry. Scaloni, Argentina's coach, can call him on the phone and ask how Leo is physically, how he's training, what he needs. Moura and Di Lalo are pieces on the same board, surrounding Messi with players who understand his language, who don't need adaptation, who can replicate in Miami what they do in the Albiceleste. It is a national team strategy implemented in a club league. And it works because MLS is willing to allow it. Here is where the moral conflict becomes almost impossible to resolve. Because if you are a global football fan, if you want to see Messi in his best version at the World Cup, this strategy is brilliant. But if you are a fan of an MLS team that isn't Miami, you are watching your league become the personal training ground of a foreign national team. And you can't protest too loudly because you'll be accused of being envious, of not understanding the historic moment, of being against the league's growth. The easy version says that Miami is signing well, investing intelligently, and building a winning project that raises the level of the entire competition. That other teams could do the same if they had the vision and the right leadership. That the rules apply equally to everyone and Miami is simply using them better. That version sounds reasonable. It has internal logic. And it is completely false. The reality is that Miami has access to regulatory interpretations that require direct negotiations with the MLS central office. Negotiations that are only possible when you have the political capital of David Beckham as co-owner and Lionel Messi as star employee. The reality is that Messi's contract includes equity clauses and agreements with Apple TV that technically aren't salary but function as such. The reality is that when Tata Martino asked for flexibility in the salary cap, he wasn't asking for the whole league. He was asking for Miami, and the league granted it to him in ways that will never appear in an official statement. If this surprises you, the following will blow your mind. Because there are internal documents, leaked on specialized forums, calculating that if you applied the standard salary cap to Miami's current squad plus the signings in process, you would be violating the limit by approximately 45%. And the only way those numbers add up is if you assume that almost half of the real wage bill is being paid by external sources that don't count against the cap external sources that, coincidentally, have commercial ties to the same team owners or the league's TV deals. It is a financial nesting doll system. Messi gets paid by Miami. But he also gets paid from an image deal with a beverage company that sponsors MLS. And he also has a stake in the franchise value growth. And he also receives bonuses linked to Apple TV global audiences. Add all that up and his real remuneration is astronomical. But only a fraction counts officially against the salary cap. The same happens with every star signing. Celso, if he arrives, will have a similar structure. And when other teams ask, how do they do that? The answer will be a 300-page document full of legal technicalities that basically say, because we can, and you can't. Now imagine you are a young Argentine talent playing at Boca. You receive 2 offers, one from River Plate, with history, with passion, with a chance to play Libertadores. Another from Inter Miami, with Messi, with preparation for the World Cup, with a salary structured so you earn double but officially collect less. What do you choose? D. Lullo already chose. And he isn't the last one who will. Because Miami isn't competing just with money. It is competing with the promise of being part of the last act of Messi's career, of being in the historic photo, of training every day with the best player who ever lived. And that promise has a cost for the rest of the league that no one is calculating. Because every time a South American talent chooses Miami over another MLS team, every time a player in his peak rejects European offers to come to Florida, the perception is reinforced that there are 2 categories of teams, Miami and everyone else. And in a sport where the anyone can win narrative is essential to maintain interest, that perception is lethal. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what is really happening in MLS. Now, there is an additional element that almost no one mentions because it requires connecting dots that are very far apart. A few months ago, Messi gave an interview where he said, literally, "In the worst case, I'll be there watching," referring to the 2026 World Cup. That phrase generated instant panic among Argentine fans. But if you read it in context with everything happening in Miami, it acquires a completely different meaning. It isn't a statement of doubt. It is an expectation management strategy. Because Messi knows that if he promises to play the World Cup and then gets injured, the emotional weight will be unbearable. But if he says, maybe I won't play, and then appears in perfect condition, it will be a heroic surprise. And Miami is the perfect stage for that narrative. Because here he can play 20 minutes in an inconsequential match and no one will criticize him. He can miss 3 match days for precaution and the fans will applaud him. He can train at half speed in January, at 3/4 in March, and at full throttle in May, just when the Copa America starts, which is the dress rehearsal for the World Cup. The MLS gives him that flexibility that no European league would give him. And in exchange, the league gets the guarantee that Messi will remain the face of the competition until the last day. Do you see the deal? It is symbiotic. Miami needs Messi to justify its financial exceptions. Messi needs Miami to arrive at the World Cup in optimal conditions. The MLS needs both to maintain global relevance. And all other teams need to accept that reality or stay out of the conversation. But here comes the twist that changes the whole reading. Because while you and I discuss whether Miami is cheating or not, there is a long-term consequence no one is anticipating. And it is this: when Messi retires, when the World Cup ends, when the epic narrative of The Last Dance no longer exists, the MLS will have a massive structural problem. Because it will have normalized exceptions that now other teams with resources will demand. Los Angeles FC, with their billionaire owners, will say, if Miami could, we can too. Atlanta United, with their giant stadium, will do the same. And the league will have to choose. Either extend the exceptions and become a mini Premier League with brutal inequality, or revoke them and admit that all this was a temporary special deal, destroying its own credibility. So that would be it, right? Well, no. Because there is a final detail that almost no one has noticed, and it is the most revealing of all. The teams protesting loudest in private aren't the small ones. They are the big ones. Seattle, Portland, Atlanta. Franchises with history, with massive fan bases, with solid infrastructure. And they are furious not because Miami has Messi, but because Miami is establishing a precedent that they cannot replicate. Because it turns out that having a full stadium and loyal fan base doesn't give you access to the same financial tools as having Beckham on your board of directors. And that reveals something profound about how MLS really works. It isn't a sporting meritocracy. It is a network of political influences where your ability to negotiate with a central office depends more on who you are than what you have achieved. Miami has bargaining power not because it won titles, in fact, before Messi they were a disaster, but because it has the right people in the right rooms when important decisions are made. Now think about what that means for the future. If the Miami model works, if they generate revenue, if the 2026 World Cup is a success and Messi is shining, then the league will say, see, it was worth breaking the rules. And the salary cap system, which for 20 years guaranteed parity, will become a suggestion applied selectively. But if the model fails, if Messi gets injured, if audiences fall after the World Cup, then the league will have sacrificed its structural integrity for a bet that didn't work. And in that scenario, there are no winners. Only ruins. Just when you thought you had it clear, another layer appears. Because there are unconfirmed but persistent reports in sports press circles that MLS is considering permanently changing the salary cap system after the World Cup. Not eliminating it, but making it flexible in ways that would benefit teams in large markets. New York, Los Angeles, Miami. The official justification would be attracting more global talent. The real justification would be retroactively legalizing everything Miami is already doing. And here we arrive at the core of the moral dilemma I promised from the start. Is it worth destroying sporting equality to have the best player in history? The answer depends on what values you prioritize. If you value the spectacle, the greatness, the chance to see something unique, then yes. Absolutely. Messi in MLS is a historic gift that justifies relaxing rules. But if you value fair competition, institutional credibility, the idea that everyone plays under the same conditions, then no. What Miami is doing is corrosive to the sport as a concept. And the fascinating thing is that both answers are correct simultaneously. It is possible to argue with solid evidence that Miami is saving MLS from global irrelevance. And it is possible to argue with equal evidence that Miami is destroying the league's competitive integrity. They aren't contradictions. They are two truths in permanent tension. And the way MLS resolves that tension will define what kind of league it will be in the next 20 years. Because here is the truth that no mainstream media dares to say out loud. MLS is changing its own rules because it knows that Messi is its only chance to compete with Europe in terms of global relevance. And they are right. Without Messi, without that epic narrative of the Scaloneta in Miami, without the impossible signings in stadiums full of Argentine tourists, MLS returns to being what it always was, a regional league with global ambitions but without the product to back it up. Messi is that product, and the league is willing to do whatever it takes to keep him happy, competitive, and visible until the last second of his career. So, are they breaking the rules? Yes. Is it cheating? Technically no, because the rules are being modified in real time to allow what they do. Is it fair? Depends for whom. If you are a Miami fan, it is brilliant management. If you are a fan of any other team, it is institutionalized privilege. And if you are a neutral observer, It is the perfect example of how modern professional sport sacrifices sporting principles on the altar of commercial spectacle. But there is a deeper lesson here, one that goes beyond football. And it is this: rules only matter when there is a will to apply them. MLS has a salary cap. It has procedures. It has 300-page documents explaining what is allowed and what isn't. But when someone important enough arrives, when commercial interests are large enough, those rules become negotiable. They don't disappear. They are simply interpreted in ways that allow what was previously impossible. And once you establish that precedent, you can no longer go back. Because the day you try to apply the rules strictly again, someone will remind you, but for Miami you made an exception. And there is the real cost of all this. It isn't financial. It is reputational. It is the slow erosion of trust that the system works the same for everyone. Every team that cannot sign someone because of the salary cap, every fan who sees their club selling players while Miami buys stars, every coach who has to explain they have no budget while Miami presents million-dollar offers. All of them are absorbing the message that competitive equality is optional when there is enough money and political power at stake. The 2026 World Cup will say if the bet was worth it. If Messi lifts that cup, if Miami becomes synonymous with football glory, if global audiences explode and MLS finally manages to be taken seriously by Europe, then history will say they did the right thing. That sometimes you have to break the rules to do something big. But if something goes wrong, if Messi gets injured or Argentina disappoints or audiences fall after the tournament, then MLS will have mortgaged its integrity for a bet that didn't work. And there is no way back from there. What is happening in Miami is not just a team signing well. It is a social experiment on how much a league is willing to distort itself to accommodate an icon. And the answer, so far, is everything. Absolutely everything. The rules, the parity, the credibility, even the very concept of fair competition. Everything is on the table. Everything is negotiable. Because in the end, MLS made a decision. It prefers to be relevant and unfair than fair and invisible. And with Messi on the field, surrounded by the Scaloneta, preparing for the World Cup on US soil, that decision seems brilliant. But the day Messi is no longer there, we will have to review if it was really worth it. And when that day comes, we will probably discover that the answer isn't simple. That we won something and lost something. That we saw greatness but sacrificed integrity. That Miami gave us the best football MLS has ever produced, but at a cost we still haven't finished calculating. Because that is the deal. It always was. And everyone, absolutely everyone, knew exactly what they were accepting when they decided the rules could be flexible. Subscribe because in March the transfer market madness begins, and this is just the start.